Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Even though I walk, I'm your host, retired Air Force firefighter and Navy chaplain, and currently serving as a hospice chaplain and veteran program coordinator, Steve Mills. You'll see the background is a little bit different, a little bit plain. You'll understand why in about a month or so. Hey, in today's episode, I have a conversation with Congressman Tom Cole. He is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and he shares his story of faith and family and how they've influenced him in serving our country. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. And, oh, by the way, the congressman and I did not coordinate our clothes at all. You'll see. Congressman, I appreciate you coming on my podcast, Even Though I Walk. It's based off of Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. I did my doctoral work in it, using it as a healing response to combat stress and PTSD. I did that in 2009, and it is continuing to bear fruit. And again, I appreciate your time. Now, I've heard it said that in polite company, one should not discuss politics or religion. So we have a congressman and a chaplain. I think we might break that rule, but I know we can break it congenially. But again, I appreciate you, and I've read up about you. I've watched some videos on you, and fascinated by your office in D.C. So I'm a member of the Choctaw tribe, and I learned something about that. That Indians are the only ones allowed to possess an eagle.
That's correct. Because they're an endangered species, but there's a special exception. It's one of the great gifts you can get. And as a matter of fact, the guy who gave it to me, Ernie Stevens, who is head of the Gaming Association for Tribes in Washington, D.C., he's an Oneida Indian from Wisconsin. He and I will both be inducted later this year in Native American Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City together. We've worked together, of course, for many years, but I had no idea he was going to be nominated as well. And a big guy, great basketball player when he was in college.
Yeah, amazing. So, yeah, in doing some research, I've learned a lot of things, not just about you, but also about my heritage as well. So I just want to have a conversation and just learn about Tom Cole. Who is Tom Cole? Growing up, I know your mom was the mayor of Moore. Your dad did 20 years in the Air Force. But tell us about your upbringing.
Well, we're a pretty typical service family. My family very deeply rooted in Oklahoma. My mother's side of the family is Chickasaw, and the first of her forebears arrived here literally immediately adjacent to and sometimes in this district back in the 1830s. And so her family's been here ever since. My dad's father, which is non-native, or his grandfather, was born in Mississippi during the Civil War in 1862, which is where the Chickasaws are from. And he moved to Oklahoma in 1880. I mean, Mississippi was a pretty depressed. And so that side of the family's been here over 150 years. And they always have lived inside this district. So we're deeply rooted here. But my dad joined the Army Air Corps in 1940, right out of high school. Then when the war was over, came back, stayed in the service. He and my mother had gone to school together. He was a little bit older, but they'd gone to high school together. In fact, my mom used to joke about it. She said, I met your father when I was in the 5th grade, and he was in the 8th, and I graduated in 1939. He graduated in 1940. He was not much of a scholar, but he was a great football player and managed to drag that out. So he played 5 years of high school football and was still playing when he was 20 years old. He was a pretty good player, too. Very good player, actually. But anyway, they got married, and I got born when they were stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base in 1949. My brother had been born there a couple of years earlier. And then we just moved around the way service families do. Next duty station was Scott in Illinois. And then the first place I remember as a kid growing up is the Canal Zone. Because I was like there from the time I was 3 to the time I was 5 or 6. Then we went to McGuire Air Force Base for 5 years. Dad had an unusually long stint there. He was a incredible mechanic, a master mechanic, and he ran docks where they would turn around. He won. I still have the plaque. He won Dock of the Month so many times in McGuire, they stopped giving it out. And then our last place was Dover. He spent the last year of his career there. And they gave me the worst doc. He won Dock of the Month 7 out of 12 years, or 12 months. So he was pretty special at that, and would have stayed in the Air Force forever, but mom wanted my brother and I to get home. We always came home and during, family or vacations, quote unquote, you get 3 weeks, months off a year, and we would beeline it back to Oklahoma. They both went to Ardmore High School, so grandparents on both sides of the family were there, aunts, uncles, cousins, all that sort of thing. But mom really wanted us raised in Oklahoma. And I remember the climactic meeting of the family. And we had and my brother and I didn't know anything but the Air Force as Air Force brats. And we loved it. We loved going, living on bases, and they're cool places. I mean, military families, there's no, I mean, you make friends in a hurry, and people are coming and going a lot, and they got a common code and a common set of values. It's a great way to grow up. But she wanted us to grow up in Oklahoma as Oklahomans. And so we had a vote after this long discussion. Mom pointed out that dad's pension would only go up like $10 a month if he stayed in another 10 years. They've restructured that now. It's a lot better. They put a lot more value on people staying longer. But anyway, it was 3-1 to stay in the service, but the one was her. And so the debate was over, and we came back to Oklahoma. I thought my brother and I would grow up in Ardmore. There was still the air base. There was an air base there until 65. It's now the industrial park for the town. It was still operating. Dad thought he could get a job out there as a civilian defense worker. He ended up getting a much better job offer at Tinker. We moved to Moore. And so I'm 4 blocks from the house I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma. We moved there in 1960, November. And it was a town of about 1,700 people. Today it's a town of about 65,000 people. So, I mean, we sort of grew up with the town. That's where mom got into politics. Dad again did another 20 years as civilian defense worker at Tinker. And then my brother followed a very similar path. He went into the Air Force during the Vietnam era, and like Dad, Marine mechanic, came back out. He didn't do a full career. Went to work at Tinker Air Force Base. Now he's retired. So again, life been pretty closely associated with the military growing up. And both of my parents, I would say, had a real commitment to public service. Now, my dad, you wouldn't have drug him into politics, with 12 horses. But his service was in uniform and then helping the people that are in uniform. He was magnificent. I had guys in the service. My cousin, who was later a colonel in the Air Force, told me, he said, your dad was still a legend when I got in the Air Force, as to, how good he was at making sure that airplanes were airworthy. And he took that job very seriously. And then my mom, the Indian side of the family had actually always been somewhat political. My great-grandfather, her grandfather, was treasurer of the Chickasaw Nation before statehood. Her uncle, her great uncle, my great uncle, was governor of the Chickasaw Nation. She always had kind of a political bent. And as soon as we were out of the service, she traveled around. She grew up in Depression era Oklahoma as a Democrat. And she said, I remember when I saw were the only 2 Republicans, I think, living in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Her girlfriend leaned over to me, and we saw this attractive couple in a suit, tie, and well-dressed woman. And my girlfriend leaned over me and went, shh, those are the Republicans, like they were the only 2. But as we traveled around, she decided wherever there were 2 parties that were competing with one another, and people forget how corrupt one party Oklahoma was. And it was more transparent. It was better. And she kind of was naturally conservative. She was a big Nixon fan in the 50s and early 60s. She was a Nixon alternate delegate when he was nominated for president in 1968. But she got involved in local politics. And back then, I mean, literally, state was 12, 13% registered Republican. Got to know Henry Bellman when he was state chairman of the Republican Party, and she was a state committee woman from Cleveland County. So I grew up with people like Henry Bellman and Dewey Bartlett coming into the House, and we didn't have money or influence, but they just weren't very Republicans, and Mom was very good at organizing things. And so she became kind of the ace organizer in northern Cleveland County. And I remember Bud Wilkinson coming to the House when he was running for the Senate, and she would get the local Republicans together and they would give their pitch and get the ones involved in politics and would. So I grew up in a pretty political household. It was a divided household for a while. My dad was a New Deal Democrat. But the debates were always incredibly interesting. And eventually she won, and he became a Republican, like most.
And they have 51% of the vote.
Yeah, well, she demonstrated that when we ended up coming back. So,
Right.
But no, it was a great household. My parents were both great patriots. They were wonderful parents. They worked hard for their kids. Didn't have a lot, but, nobody ever wanted for a meal. Everybody, got the support they needed. And I grew up with the belief everybody should be raised by a non-commissioned officer. I guarantee you. My dad had a fine non-coms talent for using foul language, but he never against my mother. And it was usually directed at my brother or me, and we usually deserved it when it came.
So politics was really in your history, it's in your blood, and that kind of leads me. So you went to school to be a history professor.
Yeah.
And now at politics, and we're going to get to the history part as well, because
Sure.
I love that aspect. And I looked at some of the books that you've read and are reading, and my wife is a prolific reader. She'd probably read 300 books a year.
Wow.
She is, and has heard of most authors. I'm a decent reader, but nothing like
300 is that's a big number.
Yeah, she'll have 5 or so going at the same time.
Wow.
And I have to trudge through one. So really, what prompted you? What was the catalyst for you to get into politics and into rise?
Really, my mom.
Congress?
I was always interested in politics because she was interested in politics, and it was discussed at the table. Look, again, when you grew up in a military family, particularly in the 50s, the Cold War was a real thing, and when bases would go on mobilization, I still remember very well when Khrushchev came. I think it was 57. To the United States because he landed at McGuire Air Force Base. We went out to see the plane, and my dad is, again, probably the top master sergeant. That was the top rank at that point for a non-commissioned officer. Could get us right up to the plane because everybody was, well, that's Sergeant Cole and his 2 kids, so they're going to, obviously we weren't there when Khrushchev was on the plane, but we got pretty close. But, I remembered things like that growing up, and we talked politics a lot, always. National politics, and when we got to Oklahoma politics, because Mom was active there. But what really got me into it was she worked as a Republican volunteer and for about 16 years. She worked in other people's campaigns. She was a local organizer, all that sort of stuff. And finally, in 76, I was in graduate school at the University of Oklahoma. I was pursuing a degree in British history. Local party people talked my mother into running for the state house. And she waged a really good campaign. And I helped a little bit. I put out some signs and did a couple things, but I didn't help much. I mean, I was like most graduate students. I was focused on my deal and getting the degree done. And she lost that election. The only one and it was really close. I mean, she was at 49.5%. Got more votes than any winner had ever gotten, but we had both liquor by the drink and the presidential election on the ballot, and she didn't cover stuff. And I mean, I was talking the worst place on the planet to be is your mother loses a campaign and you haven't done what you know you should have done for her, given all the sacrifices she did for me. So we used to have Sunday dinner together when I was in graduate school. My wife and I would drive from Norman up to Moore, and we'd get a washing machine because we didn't have one in our apartment. And, Mom would make a great Sunday dinner. Somehow my car was always empty when I got there, but my dad would sneak out and fill it up. It's kind of stuff like they were wonderful, wonderful parents. But we were talking about her campaign a couple months after, and I said, I think I understand why you lost. And she looked at me really skeptically and said, yeah, really? Why, kid? Because you didn't do much to help. And I said, I think you tried to be the campaign manager and the candidate at the same time. It's a very common mistake for first-time candidates for local office. And I said, I don't think you can do both those things. And if you'll run again, I'll learn how to run a campaign. And I think you would win because she dynamite the door. She was a very engaging person. People liked her. And you just need more time working voters one-on-one. Somebody else needs to get the volunteers organized and the signs out and help raise the money and do these things. I never thought she'd run again, or I probably never made that commitment. But in February of 78, I was in London on a Fulbright fellowship. And my mom gets in touch with me and says, I'm running. When are you coming home? And she knew I was coming back in June. So I said, okay. So I got back in June. The Republican Party of Oklahoma used to put on little kind of 3 or 4 day schools for managers for local races. I went to one of those. I went down, talked to the people of the department at OU, my chairman of the department, my dissertation advisor, and I was teaching European history that summer. I said, I'm going to teach the classes because I need the money, but I want to be honest with you, I'm on a full fellowship here. I'm not going to do anything probably on my dissertation until November. I'm going to do this thing for my mom. And they were great. They were, look, you're our best student. We don't get a lot of Fulbright scholars around here. You do what you need to do. Come back with, well, so I ran the campaign. And she was every bit the candidate I predicted she would be. And we won that election. And along the way, I found out, number one, I really like campaigns. When I was a kid in high school and in college, I was a pretty good football player. I was all conference in high school. I could play D3 football. I like team sports, and adult politics is a team sport. It's an adult team sport. And a locker room is after a game is a lot like a watch party after an election. You're there together with people that you've fought with, worked with. You spent months on the project. There is a game. There is a day. There is a score. And it's very bonding, win or lose, because you fought for something you believe in that's bigger than yourself. Team, whatever it is. And I like that. So I just started running campaigns for fun while I was finishing up my degree. And I was pretty good at it. But I didn't know people paid you to do it. So finally, I had a special election, a guy that was actually a retired Coast Guard guy who'd been a Coast Guard recruiter. His son and I played high school football together. And he called me and said, hey, any chance you'd run my 6-week special election for county commissioner? I said, oh, Mr. Wilson, I don't think I can do that. I'm at a pretty critical point in my dissertation. And he goes, I'll pay you. And I said, really? He said, yeah, how about $100 a week? Okay. And he won. And about a year or so after that, I got a call from the state party chairman. I gotten involved in state party politics, and a guy that he tried to hire said, no, you should hire this guy. I've got another opportunity. And went up to see him. His name was Harold Hunter, his former state legislator, been a congressional candidate, big rancher up in Wacomas, close to Enid, Republican territory. And anyway, he offered me a job. He said, can I talk you out of academic life for 1 year? And it was 1980. We were having our discussion in December of 79. And Don Nichols was running for the Senate. He and my mother had become really good friends in the state legislature. Actually, he and I were talking about it. We said, your mom got me going. I probably wouldn't be a Christian. She got me into the prayer circle in the legislature. And so he was running. Ronald Reagan was one of my heroes. He was running. And I noticed that 1 year, I can do 1 year, and it paid more than I was making as a graduate assistant. So I did. And after that, there was always another political job. They just kept coming. I mean, win, lose, or draw. And there was a lot of losing as well as winning efforts over the years. But there was always something, and it always kept me in Oklahoma. It was always something I was interested with. And I was usually working for or with people I liked a lot or admired a lot. And so that just is the path that opened up to me, and I've always felt bad about that because my wife married me because I was an academic. Her dad had been a business law professor at Bowling Green University in Ohio State University, where she's from. And, she ended up in a life that she did not plan to lead. Mm-hmm. So she's been very understanding.
My wife's dad was a minister. And so as a preacher's kid at PK, she grew up thinking, I am not marrying a minister. I'm not going to do it. So 39 years later, here we are. I would venture to say a chaplain has a different role than the church pastor. I did pastor a church for 3 years, and it was a small farming community in Waverly, Missouri. Lovely people, incredible, but that was not my calling. When I interviewed to be a Navy chaplain, and the Navy reached out to me just out of the blue. And I still have this letter. Dear Reverend Mills, this letter might change your life. Don't throw it away. I should probably throw this letter away. I read it again. And how would you like to serve with the men and women of the sea services? No. How do you like to go out in the field with the Marines? No, that's a no. We pursued it. God kept opening doors. And when they offered me a commission, that was the mission field. That was what God had prepared me for. And then as I did 10 years as an Air Force firefighter, and then 22 as a Navy chaplain. And when I retired, I thought, man, I'm done. I'm beat up. My body, I've had more body parts replaced than a person should. I was exhausted. I was like, all right, God, thanks for that. I'm done being a chaplain. He was like, I'm going to give you a break, but you're not done. And then working in hospice has been the most rewarding, heartbreaking job I've ever had.
Very tough.
And you talk about the team aspect and everything. I look at my life in thirds. The first third is a firefighter. I help people directly in crises, in fires and car wrecks, medical emergencies. Then as a Navy chaplain, helping people go into combat zones and come back. Myself, having been to Iraq and Afghanistan and a few other fun places over there. But I helped people kind of in the prime of their life. And now I have the privilege of walking with them at the end of their life. And what I've discovered, nurses in general are amazing. Hospice nurses and aides are just, there's something special about it. And you'd mentioned the teamwork aspect and coming together, and it's a passion. It's a drive. I think we would all do it for free if we could, but it's just absolutely the most amazing thing. And I had never really equated all of that to a campaign or the politics, but it is. You come together for a common belief and you fight for those beliefs. And sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Sometimes now going into hospice, we know that our folks are at the end of their life, but to walk with them with dignity and honor and courage is the most amazing thing. But so one of the questions I have for you, so in politics, in life, in religion, there's really no perfect answer. My son and I, he's in the Coast Guard stationed in DC, and he and I have what I call the deep end conversations. There's no shallow end with that young man. We get right into it, and it's politics, it's religion. This last time it was the end times and all of that. And I'm like, Jonathan, my head hurts, son. It was about an hour 15, and he's sharp. It keeps me on my toes. But how do you, when you come across a situation or a decision where there's no perfect answer, how do you make peace with that?
Look, honestly, in a strange way, history helps me with that. I always say, wisdom usually comes from human experience, and that's what history is. So, I think of all the other times that maybe people didn't get what they wanted or things didn't work out the way they would like. That's just life. My parents grew up in the Depression, pretty humble beings. They're part of the greatest generation. They just don't quit. I mean, I never saw either one of them quit at anything. I never saw them, either one of them let somebody down. And you commit to do certain things, whether you win or lose. You just keep working at them. And, I enjoy working the same way. Again, my parents liked working. They were, you know, worried about that. So, most of the life lessons I've learned actually came from them or just came from the experience. Whatever you're doing, it teaches you some kind of lesson one way or the other. And so I never worried about too much. You just do the best you can and you'll see what happens the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and history is, what's the phrase? Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And I look now where some of our history is being revised, and that's a scary thing.
It is. I mean, of course, history is always, in a sense, under revision, under debate, or whatever. But I do worry. We have always been an optimistic nation. We've never been a perfect nation. And frankly, sometimes we're almost historically illiterate. I was looking at a survey the other day that almost half the public doesn't know what the 4th of July is. They know we're celebrating this for our country.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know it's the Declaration of Independence and is the reason why we're celebrating it. And so, that can be a blessing and a curse. I mean, sometimes not knowing, ignorance can be bliss occasionally, but in the end, you're better off having a broad understanding that human achievement only comes from effort, and that there's usually a lot of setbacks along the way, and a lot of challenges. I mean, it was easy to do, then it probably wasn't worth doing.
That's right.
The things that are hard to do are the things that you want to do. And I look at somebody like let's just say what I would consider the greatest person of the 20th century is Winston Churchill. And how many setbacks in that life. I mean, he was supposed to be done. He was in his wilderness years and the end of his career when he didn't have any earthly idea the most important thing he would do, the Second World War, was ahead of him. He doesn't become prime minister until he's 65. And he'd been a has-been so many times earlier in his career. Well, he's changed parties. Well, he'll never survive that. Or Gallipoli, he'll never survive that. Or he was a bust at, Chancellor of the Exchequer. He won't survive that. He got on the wrong side of Stanley Baldwin, who was probably the preeminent power broker in British conservative politics, prime minister before Neville Chamberlain. Well, he survived them all. And the most important part of his life was still ahead of him. But he never quit at anything, and he was always engaged. And, it's amazing, an amazing life. So you go a long way in life. You just don't quit.
Yeah, and one of my passions are obviously veterans, but specifically Vietnam vets. And I feel that our nation, our newer generations don't know what those men and women went through. One of the things with the podcast, I've interviewed a couple of Vietnam prisoners of war, former POWs, interviewed Chuck de Bellevue, Vietnam ace, had 6 kills from the backseat of a F-4 Phantom. Phenomenal American, great guy. And one of my favorite interviews was with a lady, Carol Hickerson. And the story would take too long to tell, but her present husband was a POW for 5.5 years, and her first husband was shot down and killed in Laos. He was a Marine pilot, and every time I go to D.C., I go to the wall, and I go up and I put my hand on it and show respect and honor to him. But she designed the POW MIA flag and the silhouettes of her first husband.
Wow.
Very special people. We were stationed. The Navy did me wrong. My last duty station, they sent us to Hawaii. It was terrible. The sunsets, the perfect weather, the $6 a gallon gas. But
There's got to be some downtime, even in paradise.
yeah, it's okay. But Jim and Carol live in Hawaii, and we would have dinner with them every Wednesday. And the other thing I do is I travel once a year uh, to DC with some Vietnam vets. It's not the Honor Flight; it's a different organization. Honor Flight is amazing what they do, but we have our vets for 4 days.
Mhm.
We take them to different memorials, and the healing process. We literally saved lives. We had one gentleman who said, I was going to go home and kill myself. But because what you all have done for me these 4 days, I'm not going to. And it's incredible. So my passion is to get their stories out there for two reasons: to educate people, but also the healing that comes from them telling their story. And that kind of segues into the next uh, question or phrase really is, and again, I go back to the podcast is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, or literally deepest darkness, what valleys have you walked through and how have they shaped you, not just as a congressman, but as a person?
Well, I haven't had, I would not compare any experience that I've had with some of the folks you're talking about. I haven't been in combat in a situation like that. Uh, I've had the privilege of seeing some amazing people in stressful situations. Um, everybody has some challenges in their life. My dad had an alcohol problem, but it took a long time. We'd all given up. He finally dealt with it. Um, and, I had an uncle, and we were talking about before we started filming that, look, he was an interesting guy. He grew up, in Ardmore, contemporaneous, obviously, a little bit older than my mother. And I asked him once, Uncle Tom, how'd you get in the Navy? And he goes, well, it was like this. It was, I think he said late 1930s, 37 or something like that. Judge looked at me and said, son, what will it be? Reform school of the United States Navy. He said, the Navy was great until Bataan in 1942. And he'd been stationed on a little gunboat called the Canopus that was running up and down the Yangtze River. If you ever see the old movie Sand Pebbles, he's that guy. He's engineer on a little gunboat and living a kind of interesting life as a single guy. But it bring them all back at the beginning of the war, pull them into Manila and then scuttle them because you can't fight the Japanese Navy in gunboats, and give him a rifle, turn him into an infantryman. He fought in Bataan and did the Bataan Death March, Banatuan on it. But, I think about what he went through. I have, his medals are actually up on the wall in our home, and we got a very detailed account of his service record and all that stuff. But he had a tough life and faced a lot of challenges. But met some people later that were with him as POWs in Japanese prison camps, and they would tell me what a remarkable guy he was. I mean, he always seemed to be that upbeat guy and would always help everybody. His humor was always great, but he was an alcoholic. It really hit him really hard. He paid for it after.
I was going to ask, how did he deal?
Well, he was, more Native American than me. He's actually a Native American jeweler, did some beautiful work, and was a successful business guy. But he had a problem with alcohol. It led to a divorce. My first cousin, his son is in business down in, retired now actually, but down in Dallas. And, it was a rough family life for them. He ended up, living with my, grandmother who lived in Moore where I live. And honestly, he never did beat alcohol. It finally killed him. So yeah, he had a very hard life and, a challenging situation. But when he's going through what he would call the worst of it, I don't think it was. Probably his private life turned into the worst of it later because, again, it cost him his family and everything else. But, under the strain of the moment, I've never met anybody that said he didn't perform extraordinarily well. It was remembering back and coming to grips with some of the things he'd seen, some of the atrocities that he had watched committed to his friends, his comrades. Pretty tough. But yeah, I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan a lot. Probably the greatest crisis I was around in an intimate sense was the Oklahoma City bombing. And I had the very good fortune to be working for Frank Keating. I was his Secretary of State. I worked for him for 2 years running his campaign for governor, then for 4 years as Secretary of State. You know, Keating, he's one of the funniest, most ebullient, outgoing people I've ever met. And I always say we laughed every day for 6 years, except for about 2 weeks around the Oklahoma City bombing. But it was the most extraordinary exercise in public leadership that I ever saw up close, and how he handled himself, how he led from the front. The decisions he made were pretty amazing. And through that, I got to meet President Clinton for the very first time, and who came out for the bombing. And I already knew George Bush, but he came up from Texas as a brand new governor. And it was an amazing thing. So, I've been at crisis moments, big votes or big controversies in Washington, D.C. over a long, long career. But, again, you fall back on what are your values? What are you trying to accomplish? You don't let your teammates down, and you have teammates, but you're honest with them. And if you've got a difference, you deal with the difference. But most of the time I've got a challenge. I usually think, what will my mom do, or what will my dad do? And in my mom, I've got probably as good a political role model as anybody could have. I mean, she was a fabulously gifted local politician. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a funny story about it, because she and George Bush became very good friends. In 1987, I was the Republican state chairman, and my mother was a Republican state senator. And a friend of mine was running George H.W.'s campaign, then Vice President Bush's campaign, for president here in Oklahoma. I get this call, and he says, Chairman, I got good news and bad news. And I said, what's the good? The good news is the son of the Vice President of the United States is coming in to campaign for his dad. And I said, well, that's very nice. That's great. He said, I said, what's bad? He said, the bad news is I told him I'd get about 20 state legislators, and for him to give a little talk to, and I haven't gotten that done, and I'm on the way to the airport to pick him up. Can you help me? So the Republican headquarters is about 17 blocks immediately north of the Capitol on Lincoln Boulevard. And my mother was down there. And so I said, I did what I did in every other crisis of my life. I went to talk to my mother. So I beelined it down there, explaining, we got the son of the vice president coming. This guy's kind of screwed this up. Can you help me get some legislators together? And, she was a senator, so she got it and gave me one of these, oh, geez, kid, looks, and gets a room, and that's all great. And then, we round up about 20 legislators, and Bush comes in. And most people know this, but it's worth, he idolized his parents, and particularly revered his father. And he starts giving this homily about his dad, talking about his many years of public service, talking about him as a young man, as a combat pilot, 58 missions in the Pacific, shot down over Chichijima. A great book on that called Flyboys by James Brady that, covers 9 pilots, 8 of whom were captured by the Japanese and ceremonially eaten, cannibalized. Bush is only saved because an American submarine rises at the last moment, which we have on film. It's incredible, as the Japanese patrol is coming out to pick him up. So anyway, talks about all this and his dad's values and what he'd learned from his father and everything. And so we're walking out of the room, and my mother and I used to have this deal. We'd call ourselves by our respective titles when we were both in politics. And so I leaned over to her and I said, well, Senator, what do you think? And she looked at me and she said, well, Chairman, I think you should talk about your mother the way he talks about his father. I love that young. And they became really good friends. And she co-chaired the campaign, drove him around campaign. And every time I'd see him, he would ask me, how's the senator? How's your mom? And because they really did, I got the most lovely handwritten note. But actually both my father and my mother later passed away, from, President Bush. He's just such a class act. But again, you do get some experiences in this. And I remember later, after I'd made in '88 and, then I'd gone up to DC and worked at the NRCC while his dad was president, interacted with him quite a few times, there. And see the governor again. He and Keating are elected the same election night. Neither of them were supposed to win. Both of them did win, or at least they weren't supposed to win at the beginning of their campaign. His chief of staff, who later ran his campaign, Joe Albaugh, a good friend of mine, been my boss earlier in the Reagan years, Oklahoman. And so, they had this interesting parallel career. And I remember when we're doing the ceremony, the a prayer session with Billy Graham and kind of on Sunday after the bombing earlier in the week, Kathy Keating all put together, organizing the crowd. And, we got the president there, Billy Graham there, and obviously Governor Keating. And I look back in the crowd and I see Joe Albaugh is a really big guy. He's about 6'5", burr head. You can pick him out. He was Bush's chief of staff at that time. Later a cabinet member, ran FEMA actually during 9/11. And so I see Joe, and what in the world is he doing here? I went back, and as I broke through the crowd, there's Bush standing next to him. And I said, Governor, what are you doing here? I mean, we had no idea you're coming. And he goes, well, isn't that what neighbors do? I'm here to help and just grieve with you guys. And I said, well, I need to get you up front where the governor and the president are at. He goes, no, I can't do that. And I said, Governor, you're going to do that or I'll be fired the next day. I mean, if he finds out you were here and I put you back here and you've come this way to be with us at a moment like this, but that's one thing I'll say about George Bush. I had a lot of experiences with him over a lifetime. And again, he always stayed in touch with my mom. And matter of fact, she was a delegate and he got nominated in 2000. He made sure that she was sitting in the family box, for one of the nights, not every night, but that was an honor she's sitting there with former President Bush and with soon to be First Lady Barbara Bush, that sort of stuff. But, Bush is just a total class act. I mean, everything about him is, something you can be proud. But again, he'd tell you the same thing. I learned all that from mom and dad pretty much. And it took him, if you know much about his, life, it took him a little while to learn it. Yeah. And it takes us all a little while, but we're shaped so much by the people around us. Frank Keating is the guy that I had the great privilege of learning a lot about leadership from in the supreme national crisis. My parents, just displayed the kind of character you'd want parents to display and made the kind of sacrifices for their kids within the limits of their means that they could make. I mean, who could have a better set of role models than that? And again, it was always family first. And and my dad was one of those guys till late in his life. He said, I'm not going to church, but you are. Yeah, because your mom wants you in church.
The bombing really, and that's what started the Oklahoma Standard. And I've lived, I think my wife and I figured out we lived in 23 moves, lived in states and overseas. And you're right. When you're in the military, especially overseas, you become friends instantly. But with the Oklahoma Standard, so my parents are from Hugo, Durant, that area. They migrated to Southern California in the early 60s, and that's when I came on the scene. So I was born there and grew up.
A lot of Choctaws did the same thing. Former Chief Pyle.
Yeah, so there's a lot of them in Nipomo, California, Pismo Beach, A lot of my family's there, but and we were stationed in some other states, and I won't mention the particular one, but they said, well, if you're not born here, you're not ever going to be from here. I said, yeah, that's fine. When we moved I got stationed at Tinker as a Navy chaplain in 2006. When people found out that my roots are from Oklahoma, they're like, son, welcome home. And it is just, we've never felt that ostracization. And again, we go back to those crises, to those dark valleys. And yes, some have darker valleys than others, but we all have ours. And I go back to the two key phrases. Even though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And even though a bombing happens, even though crises happen, even though whatever diagnosis happens, I won't fear, because you have sent. God is with us, but also he sent other people to walk with us. And I would imagine it's got to be the same way in Congress. You can't do it alone. You have to bring people together. But I want to do something fun here for just a second. Where's your favorite place in Oklahoma to go think?
To go what?
To go think, to contemplate.
That's a good question. Yeah, honestly, I do most of my thinking at home, but, I love the Oklahoma State Capitol building. I did a lot of things there as a state senator, secretary of state. And Keating always had a philosophy that, public buildings ought to elevate public life, that they ought to be. And he began this process, which has actually given us one, I think, the most attractive state capitals in the country. He's the one that finally got the dome on the Capitol, and he did it without public money. He went and raised the money himself to make sure that was done, and started the beautification of the Capitol, which has continued under many subsequent governors, and particularly my friend that I served with, the late Charles Ford, who's the longest-serving Republican state senator in Oklahoma history. He began a Capitol art program. So there's really pretty high-quality art all through the Capitol now. So many people did that. But again, I don't know that I've ever had one place. I just like Oklahoma. And so there's no particular place in a crisis that I feel the need to go off to.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Bourbon. But different phase of my life. Look, I was a British historian, so I drank tea, in college and whatever. I got into coffee, which I now have to have every morning. But I got into coffee in politics. You'd go around offices raising money or talking to candidates, and everybody offer you coffee. And, you're not going to be in Oklahoma in the 1980s, no oil boom, and ask for tea. So I got used to coffee and loved it. And, I'm very fond of bourbon too. So.
Okay. All right. Early bird or night owl?
Both.
Okay.
I get up very early. I mean, I'm usually up between 5:30 and 6, almost never later than that. I very seldom go to bed before midnight, 1:00.
Okay.
I mean, I like, I don't need a lot of sleep. I mean, I just never have. I certainly don't need anywhere near 8 hours. It's usually for me 4 to 6.
Okay. And then favorite president?
Lincoln. I think we certainly had some great presidents, and there's no question. There's no George Washington. There's no United States of America. And I think you have to say him. But I still think the greatest crisis in American history was the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when we had to finally come to grips with the contradiction of who we were and who we aspired to be, who we said we were going to be in the Declaration of Independence, and the things we said in our own Constitution. And, again, bloodiest war in American history is American fighting Americans, the greatest named casualty. One of my favorite battlefields, Antietam, which I always tell people. I like to walk Civil War battlefields. I've done a lot of them. And being in Washington, if it's been shot over and it's in Virginia, Pennsylvania, or Maryland, or any of that immediate area, I've been there. And some of the great battlefields in the West, like Shiloh and certainly Vicksburg. But, pretty special to have those opportunities. But Lincoln, again, nobody defined America better. Nobody made us live up to who we should be more. Nobody had a greater strain. I mean, I think even of the strain of the, Second World War, which killed the president in a sense, or the First World War that broke the president in a sense. Who dealt with greater tragedy than Lincoln, and who kept us together and who inspired us more. So again, I think unquestionably my favorite president. And I think because he embodies the American experience so much. He's born on the frontier of his era. He's very humble circumstances, no formal education to speak of. Literally the most self-made man of self-made men is Lincoln, because I call Churchill the greatest person of the 20th century. I believe Lincoln was the greatest person of the 19th century, but one was born to royalty and privilege, and he used those advantages, and he had his challenges. From where Lincoln, I usually try to measure people not from where they end up, from where they start. We're all equal. We don't all get to start in the same place.
Right.
And there are very few people that started in circumstances that we had a difficult relationship with his father. He lost his mother early. He had all kinds of personal challenges as a young man. He manages to make himself into a lawyer, and turned out one of the really fine lawyers of his generation. He manages to rise from poverty to status. He, pretty obscure, even when he's successful in politics. I mean, Illinois politics, he has one term in Washington, D.C. in Congress, and manages to turn that into the president, becoming president, and the most consequential president at the most challenging time in American history. We are very blessed to have had him. The United States has been that way. I do believe providentially we tended to have great leaders when we needed great leaders. We've been very lucky in that regard. I think of Ronald Reagan in my lifetime. I never saw a greater. Matter of fact, I will never forget. And I was a Reagan guy. I was a Reagan state director and was reelected. I was executive director of the state party, and we were a very Reagan state in 1980. But I remember the failed effort to release the Iranian hostages in April. I think it was in April of 1980. I was driving up Lincoln Boulevard going to the Republican headquarters. It was on 23rd Street, just immediately east of the state capitol, western state capitol, excuse me. And the news broke, and at that time we were living through double-digit interest rates, double-digit inflation. Our economy was a mess. The Russians were in Afghanistan. Just nothing seemed. And I thought, what is that? We can't even pull off this, rescue message. And I just, you thought maybe it was 8 years later, the Cold War is on the verge of ending with us winning. It was, that was the dominant geopolitical struggle of my lifetime. I grew up in the midst. That's what my dad was involved in, was that sort of thing, and my other members of my family. And we won that. We're the greatest economy in the world. We're, the only superpower left on the planet, just about. And it's pretty extraordinary. Presidency. Every now and then you get a president that does that. Lincoln did it. It's a supreme crisis moment. Russ Reagan did it in his way. FDR in the Depression. It's certainly not a Republican exclusive, but again, no George Washington, no United States of America. We had the right guy. Partly because he didn't want to be the president of the United States. Could have been the king. He didn't want to do that either.
Exactly.
He wanted to get back to Mount Vernon and his family and live the life of a gentleman in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
We have an amazing history, but again, we do have a talent for producing the right leadership at the right time.
We do, and it is providential. And I look at our country now, and I'm a fan of Reagan. Uh, he's arguably my favorite president in the 20th century, and I would agree with Lincoln. Uh, I've toured Ford's theater, and just standing there, taking it in, trying to picture what it was like and the sacrifices that people have made for us. And I stand in awe of men and women like that. Um, all right. So let's see. So what would you say to the veteran, to the public servant, to the person who's working hard, walking through grief, criticism, loneliness, uncertainty? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I'd say to any veteran is thank you. Look, I did not serve. My dad did, my brother did, my grandfather did, my uncle did. Uh, but I have a keen appreciation for people that put their lives on the line to protect us and to make sure that we have all the extraordinary blessings that we have here, the right to live in freedom, the right to go as far as your abilities and your ethic can take you. And security that we take for granted that so many other people around the world never enjoy, and the cost that's associated with that. So, but I think you're always in the debt of people that, again, put on a uniform, pick up a weapon, do whatever it takes to defend the country, so that the rest of us benefit from it. Second thing I think I would say is, uh, to people that are, in a challenge situation, and maybe people that have failed at something, remember, this is the great country of second chances. We live in a place where you can fail and succeed later. And you're going to have failures. You can fail personally, not just, I don't get a task done. We don't all measure up every single day. There's certainly some days in my life I look back on and say, why was I that stupid? Or why was I that thoughtless? And why can't I learn from that? And I just always, we have a God of second chances. We have a country of second chances. Not many people have those two things. Uh, and we all, also, if you have had a tough time, what can we do as a people and society to help you? I mean, to really help you, not to give you something, but it's the classic, hand up, not a handout. What can we do to put you in a position where, you have that second chance to be the person or accomplish the thing that you wanted to do? I think that's what makes Americans a special people, and it makes this country a special place. We do that more and better than anybody else in the world. And I think that about our faith, too. I think, again, if you don't believe in forgiveness and redemption, you sure are not a Christian, because we all get it. We all require it. And we're all fortunate enough to believe in a God and a Savior that have provided those things for us. And so I would tell people again, just don't quit. Don't give up. You're always amazed if you just keep working through things. If you could just, and pray. I mean, God is a God that answers prayers. I've seen it in my own life. Yeah. I ended up in politics, I think, in some ways. I mean, this was not a great crisis, but as I was going through graduate school, I was doing really well. But there was a collapse in the history market, and you could apply for a job. And I remember once getting filed five, and there were over 200 applicants to be a British historian. And, I was pretty good, but I prayed, what do I need to do to be successful? And, I'm not doing something right. And, magically, that's when politics opened up. So, it was like, well, I guess, and I thought it was a detour. I mean, I thought it was, well, I'll do this, but I'm coming back. I mean, I'm finishing my degree, which I did, published a couple articles on, but politics was it for me, which is not something I set out to do. I mean, I always say my whole political career, I've been a state senator, I've been a secretary of state, I've been the top staffer at both the Congressional Committee and the Republican National Committee. in pretty important elections. A very successful consultant. I have a company that I still own a piece of that still does it. That's over 40 years old, polls for 16 different state chambers of commerce. That's really high quality, really good work. You know, that was evidently where I was supposed to go, not where I thought I was supposed to go. I still think I'd have been a pretty good historian, and I loved it, but it just wasn't the place. But, yeah, I lived in a country that, what do you know about politics? Well, not a lot. My mom was a state senator. You ever done anything in polling? No, I became one of the best pollsters in the United States, and I didn't go to college to learn it. I just learned it, and then proved it by doing good work for a lot of years. Uh, and then thought, honestly, when I went to Congress, I thought my career electively is over. My job is to elect other people, not to serve in elected office anymore. And then that door magically opened up at the last minute. And, I always believe God gives you a door to walk, you walk through it. I mean, it's usually there for a purpose.
Well, and, as a veteran, I appreciate when people say thank you for your service, but we all serve and it's all interconnected, and the military can't serve without Congress supporting them, and Congress can't serve without the public supporting. And so it's all interchanged. But Congressman, again, I really appreciate the time. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and again, I'm fascinated with your uncle and his service, and again, I appreciate you very much. So much so, these are very exclusive. You can buy them on my website. But coffee cup, even though I walk, and
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah, as you drink your coffee, or vitamin B, as I like to call it.
I drink a lot of coffee. Don't worry. I don't have a mug every day. I start out with about 20 ounces.
All right. Well, good. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
Yes,
what a privilege for me.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in to the podcast, Even Though I Walk. I am your host, Steve Mills, and I've been here with Congressman Tom Cole. Continue to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more notifications. And as always, keep walking.